My name is Donna Raviv, and I became involved with We Do just this past year. And my grandparents, Harry and Sarah Mustasher, survived the Shoah in hiding. They met just before the start of the war when Harry was passing through my grandmother's Sarah's town in Poland called Stryjew. And when the Nazis marched the Jews out of Stryjew, my grandmother was subjected to the sorting lines that were all too common. She was sent along with her mother and her younger sister to one line, while her brothers were sent to another. And her mother quickly recognized what was happening and pushed Sarah to move to the line with her brothers, asking who would cook for them if not their sister. And as her mother pushed towards the Nazi soldier who was responsible for the sorting, he waved her off, and my grandmother was able to join her brothers, but turned around to see something that she would never forget, which was her 10-year-old sister wailing and crying for her not to leave. And to this day, my grandmother, who is still alive at 96 years old, carries the guilt and the pain for leaving her sister in a decision that must have been one of the hardest to make. And I grew up hearing this story. I heard stories of hiding in barns, of friends who were murdered, and the constant fear of being found. I heard stories of the righteous Gentile, Rybakova, who hid my grandparents in her attic. And most of the stories that I heard were from my grandmother. She was always the talkative one, the one who communicated her grief by telling her story. And my grandfather processed differently. He was humble and quiet and strong, and his stories came to him in nightmares that he couldn't share. And I never learned how he felt losing 5 of his 6 siblings in the Shoah. And the reality of being a 3G or any generation of descendant from survivors is that these stories come to us in bits and pieces. We'll never be able to fully know what our parents or grandparents or great-grandparents endured. We have bits and pieces of what we've learned from survivors, and with that, we can share what bits and pieces we can manage to capture in our own retelling. But even that is the key to creating a living memory of the Holocaust. And my journey with my own family story has been a lifelong attempt to fill in the blanks. And certainly in becoming involved with We Do, going through the practice of having to communicate the story in a way that others, especially children or teenagers, might understand, makes that even a bigger undertaking. In retelling the story, we actually reckon with how much we don't know. And so I wanted to just share one memento of the retelling and what it is to try and fill in some of those blanks. This is voting. This is the only surviving photo that my grandmother has from before the war. And Sarah describes this as being one of the happiest times in her life, as she played catch with a neighbor in front of her home. She stands there on the left. And in seeing this, I spent my childhood looking through this photo and trying to see the contours of her home just behind her and the barn that was her family's, and trying to understand what was even happening in this photo that somehow managed to survive, sort of sewn into the seams of clothing that was hidden away during the war. And so in contemplating this, I spent 2 months working on my own retelling, which ultimately was a gift for my grandmother to paint this one happy moment that she had to give clarity to the house behind her, the home she had before the war, the barn, and her friend Donna, who shared my name, who played with her, in the yard. And what I hope for all of us is that while we still have the ability to hear these stories from survivors themselves, I hope that we remember all of the nuances and recognize the importance of those, including the smallest details that help us weave the most tragic and sometimes most memorable moments into a history that we can communicate and use to educate generations to come. Thank you.